For some of you. So thank you so much for taking our time to join us for this interactive webinar on Employment Trends 2021. We have a very exciting panel with us today who is not only joining us to share their insights, but also to give us direction into the how next few quarters or the few months, owing to what post-pandemic situation has been, how things are going to be shaping up, what is the future looking like, where the investments can be happening, where is the staffing headed, where is the employment scenario headed, what are the skills that will be driving the future of employment from here onwards. Without taking too much time, may I invite our session chair, Sanjay Shetty, who's the Director of Business from Randstad India, who will be taking us through a very exciting journey of the discussion that is going to be happening. May I request to invite Mr. Alok Shupurkar, is the EVP and Head HR of HDFC Asset Management. May I invite Rajiv Kapoor, he is the Executive Director and CEO Group Head HR from Inominda Group. Mr. Rajiv Nathani, if I may invite you, EVP and Chief People Officer, Infogain India Private Limited. These are the stalwart leaders who will be discussing not only just the aspects from an employment perspective, which is impacting their own industries, but also the allied industries, which is to cover the automotive, the banking financial sector, insurance sector, healthcare sector, and our darling that has become the technology sector, which is the underlying growth factor and driving factor for most of the industries as automation and digital life has taken over for all of us. With that, I welcome Sanjay to take over from here. Welcome, Sanjay, and over to you.
Thank you, Suchita. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me take this opportunity to extend a warm welcome to Rajiv Nathani, Rajiv Kapoor, and Alok Shupurkar for this opportunity on behalf of ISF. So it's great with this August audience to discuss a very, very relevant topic. I mean, every time you open the newspapers, you switch on the television, it's about employment trends. It's about post-pandemic. I think this is something that is absolutely relevant for all of us. So very happy to have this opportunity to discuss this. I also thought I'll use this opportunity to, just share a couple of, very key points that, I was able to gather after talking to a couple of stakeholders from the industry. Very interesting. We've all heard about work from office once upon a time. That changed to work from home. And now we have work from anywhere. So that tells you how things are changing. Second, another interesting thing that I learned is all the, people who are in kindergarten, the children today, when they join the employment, when they come of age to join the employment, category, almost 40% of the jobs that are there today would have changed, would have got upgraded. That's very, very interesting. Gig, everybody's talking about gig. Gig is expected to, grow by almost 3 times in the next 2 to 3 years, from 8 million people to 24 million. So that's a huge growth there. In terms of staffing, it's very important for us as an organization, the Indian Staffing Federation, to understand what are some of those things that we need to be geared up so that we can help the industry better. India is the 13th largest staffing industry. We are also the most attractive staffing market as per SIA. So we are in exciting times. We're also very cautious about what's happened in the last 1.5 years. So the objective of this audience is, of this session is to hear from the industry experts from their respective industries, and it's well represented. We have the manufacturing industry, we have the financial services industry, and we have the technology sector. So we'll get a good, if I may use the word 360 perspective from there, from the horse's mouth, if I may, say that. So on that note, without any further ado, let me start by, asking all of you all gentlemen, the first, point, which is on everybody's mind. Post, this pandemic, what are some of those latest developments or trends that are challenging and changing the employment scenario for your respective industries? Because every industry, there are fundamentally something which are similar, but also something which are very different. So it'd be very nice to hear. Maybe we can start with you, Alok, and then we can go to Mr. Rajiv Nathani, and then we can go to Rajiv Kapoor. Over to you, Alok. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me this evening. So my take, Sanjay, is that we are passing through a transition period, and I hope that the blip in employment numbers was temporary. Given the geopolitical scenario and the focus on India, especially when world is looking for China +1. I'm sure we are headed for a very, very interesting times in technology and manufacturing, and that can be accomplished only with the support from BFSI sector. So I see that there's a sustainable long-term positive outlook for Indian economy. And when we say this, obviously it doesn't translate into a massive employment boom. While globally before the COVID, we have seen in Europe and America, the unemployment numbers are falling. And the same scenario is likely to continue now after COVID when the economies recover. Coming back to the trend in terms of future of work, yes, there will be work, but as we see after every transition, the nature of employment and the requirements of industry do change. I'll give you a simple example. Most of us would have used that bicycle, which used to come for 600, 800 rupees. And today no bicycle is available for 800 rupees. And you start with 30, 35,000 rupees. So similarly, the cars, the repair personnel as elementary job as repair personnel to the manufacturing personnel all have gone up. That means the value add expected is dramatically changing. And that's where the staffing function or staffing business will have to really look at it. Gig economy will be having a floating manpower, and that means staffing as a profession will have to invest heavily in getting the skilled manpower at call. And skilled manpower will come only when you have a solid employer brand. Employee health for staffing people, their background verification, helping them to invest in their skill sets and continuously ensure that they come professionally, do the work and go back. So that kind of scenario I see getting built up. Another scenario for staffing industry is that increasingly industry is going to lean on staffing function or staffing organization to take out their repetitive jobs. And I'm in discussion with Randstad to take out at least 30% of my activity off the table. That means you will no longer be a conduit providing the manpower, protecting organizations against the labor laws. But not only that, but the wage arbitrage is also going to get over as the new labor code gets enforced. So staffing industry, staffing federation and the HR and business leaders will have to think that what is that extra staffing industry can do looking at the future of work, so that they not only supply the manpower, they also take partial responsibility to start with and be accountable in whatever the business outcomes are driven by businesses. So I take a pause here. We'll hear other panelists as well, and then I'll keep adding my 2 bits on this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alok, for sharing your context and also setting the tone. Let me take a step back and look at it from the journey we started from, right? With respect to the question, last 17 months, in my view, have taught us a lot of things. Whether it was related to our personal life or a professional life, we have immense learning which came in from both the contexts. Personally, I have felt more alive during these times, a lot more emotions on my mind, and gratitude to those who are upholding humanity through unprecedented compassion, love, and care. And if I look at it from the context of organizations, the good news is that we have seen companies putting human back to human resources. Employee well-being became the key differentiator under employee value propositions for these organizations. Now, since I come from technology industry, my perspective is biased towards the industry, and that's where, whatever I'll share would actually be more relevant from the technology industry I'm coming from. Technology industry has always been ever evolving industry. The way we have seen product and solutions have evolved, and the changes they have experienced, those have been significant. There was a traditional way of having technology solutions on premise, and now we have seen all of them are moved to cloud, and that acceleration in terms of the speed at which this legacy modernization and cloud transformation or adoption happened in the last 1 year and so that has been immense. And that happened primarily because of this post-pandemic situation with respect to the industry we come from. We have seen RPA from a robotics, process automation, bot automation, which has brought in a lot of efficiency. IoT is actually helping across different industry segments. And in addition to the technology advancement, the other thing which has been happening along the side is the experience which we deliver. And that has played a key role. We have seen the products have evolved just by addressing personal user experiences. Look at the mobile, context. From a Symbian to BlackBerry to Android and iOS from Apple perspective. We live in an experience economy, and that's what even our employees expect. When we look at it from organization standpoint, whether it's a prospective employee who's going through a candidate process, or whether it's our employees who are working inside the organization, everybody is looking for the experience. Now, if we bring the context from the pandemic affected economic context for IT industry, really IT industry has seen a sharp recovery from the slowdown which was caused by the pandemic. Now, what has it resulted into for us? This has actually created talent retention and hiring issues for the companies. The market at this stage is very challenging with respect to hiring and retention for us. Offer to hiring ratios have been concerning for the companies and IT industry as a whole. Every time I talk to different people who are from the industry I represent, they have the same issues which we are facing. Every single candidate has multiple options. Most of them hold multiple offers, making it difficult for companies to hire. Attrition rates are going up. Trust me, in my 1.5+ decades of work experience in the industry, I had not seen this kind of situation in the past. So despite of pandemic, IT industry is booming, and I call this market to be an employee-driven market. And I expect this demand to continue to remain high for next couple of years at least. And some of the areas where this will remain high would include cloud, analytics, digital platform, automation, IoTs, cybersecurity, because that is actually becoming an important thing as we have adapted to the virtual context all over the industries. Now, really, if you see, every company across the industry is actually a technology company, because in some way, either they have adopted the technology in their offerings to their customers, or they have actually adopted that in terms of the way they perform their business. So these kind of changes I've been seeing both from a business as well as from a people challenges point of view. Honestly, we have not yet learned the art of managing the challenges with respect to people issues which we are dealing with. The other issue which we are dealing with is the sense of belongingness. For last 17 months, people like me, we have not gone back to our offices. We're working remotely. Work from home has become the norm for us, and gradually we'll get into hybrid work environment across the globe. And that will actually create further challenges for us in terms of creating sense of belongingness for the people in the company. 30% of our population is already new. They had never seen the office. So these are other challenges which we are facing. And there's no one solution which is available because we're still evolving. So let me take pause here and Sanjay, I'll give it back to you and possibly come back again later on.
Thank you, Rajiv. It'll be nice to hear from a very different perspective from the traditional manufacturing engineering sector, which is of course in a different end of the spectrum. But again, a lot of learnings, and look forward to hearing from you, Rajiv.
Yep, thank you so much, and thanks for having me here today. Very enlightening to hear both Alok and Rajiv. So very similar, I think manufacturing, like you just set the context, we are in a touch and feel kind of an organization, and the entire manufacturing chain is like that. So I think the most impacted through this pandemic was the manufacturing, because we were producing on the ground. So what happened? And we were slowly, I think, moving towards technology. Not that we never had technology roadmaps, we had, but we were moving forward at a comfortable pace. But what pandemic did, I think it just really pushed us hard, and now technology got adopted, and everybody is using it in just a matter of a few weeks, and we are absolutely on the ball as far as technology is concerned. So we also are facing a lot of let's say challenges, while the output is thankfully becoming normal now. People are working, we are following all kinds of protocols to keep people safe. However, I think if you look at the employment trends in manufacturing, the things are now changing. First thing we should understand, this thing we used to call new normal and all, I think that's gone. It is now normal, and we are never going to go back to the earlier times. So it is now normal, let's accept it. This is the new playground, and we have to follow the rules which are already there. So in manufacturing also, I think the technology takeover has been so sharp. And like Rajiv just mentioned, we also are facing a lot of crunch on the IT front. And he's very right about the retention challenges, hiring challenges. We also are facing very similar challenges. So we are not any different from any other IT company. We are having the same challenges. Second is we are looking at very high-tech people now. People who can adapt to technology, who can drive technology in manufacturing. And 2 years ago, we used to talk Industry 4.0. It was a topic in the seminars, in the seminar halls. Now it is a reality on the shop floor. So the employment trend in manufacturing is becoming very, very IT oriented and very, very high tech. So that is a shift which is happening. And now with the new mindset coming in, the youngsters coming in, the new generation coming into employment, that lifetime employment methodology or mindset is no longer there. So how do you keep these people engaged? How do you keep them charged up? They are young people bubbling with energy, bubbling with ideas, wanting to do their own startups. And that's catching up, and India being a unicorn country now. I think everybody wants to have a startup. So how do you engage these people in a manufacturing setup? I think that itself is going to lead us into another level of employment where people are hired to engage these these new employees, to constantly keep them engaged with the manufacturing setup. So we have our own set of challenges. And of course, the struggle is still going on. And one was pandemic. And I think the auto sector went through the worst times. And we were anyways having a downtrend before pandemic. Then comes the BS6 that affected sales. And then comes the COVID. And then now we are facing our semiconductor shortage. You're reading everywhere. I think today's news was that Toyota worldwide is cutting 40% production output. So these are the kind of challenges which are being faced by the auto sector right now. On top of it, the trends are changing, the employment life cycle is changing, the employment type is changing. So we are passing through a very, very interesting time right now, and loving it every bit, because every day is a new learning we are getting. So that's all I would add as of now.
Thank you, Rajiv. And when I'm listening to three of you, bring your perspectives, and there is a common thread, and there's also differences because of the sector, which prompts me to pivot a little and go a little off script. A lot of discussions around productivity, and different organizations have different spin around it. And what we have seen across sectors when we talk to stakeholders who are CEOs, heads of productions, or HR heads, is that we have a lot of sectors where actually they've been able to improve their productivity. And it has changed a lot of mindset. And I think, especially for the audience who's listening, for the workforce, for the future, it'd be great to hear your thoughts on this particular topic, because, gone are those days, I guess, where if you, worked 15 hours a day, you were supposed to be the most hardworking, efficient, effective person. But today it's about, you may be at home, your boss doesn't know what you're doing, but you're really being productive. So it's more about outcome. So it'd be great to hear your thoughts, gentlemen, on this topic. What's the experience been in your organization with your workforce in terms of how you've been able to manage the productivity cycle when you're not in front of the people? Maybe Alok, you'd like to take a shot at that to begin with. You're on mute, Alok. Alok, you're on mute.
To me, frankly speaking, I'll speak my heart out here. Productivity is an obsolete concept. Okay. Today, what is going to be the future concept is the ideation and innovation, because that's where the differential lever will get created for industry. Please mind it, we are in an industrial era where we all are in hyperactivity zone. It is no longer a linear production where you are producing 10 cars or 15 cars a day, or I am finishing 50 transactions or 70 transactions. No. Here we are talking about the millions of transactions and customer centricity, where your AI and chatbots are doing the transaction. Now you can't say that my chatbot is productive or not productive. If it's not productive, you replace it immediately, less than a hour's time, maybe even faster than that, right? So it is the skill, the insight and ability to bring empathy to the forefront along with technology is going to be the differential metrics for industry to deliver. Now, what would that mean? And today on the platform of ISF, I'll slightly digress because I have far competent panelists to speak in detail about it. That my thought process is that ISF should quickly, assimilate themselves into create the some kind of university using the CSR money of their clients and the government framework to skilling India kind of movement, and so that they can really supply the outstanding, talented, skilled manpower, which is a need of the nation. And I will not hesitate to predict that next industrial collapse will not happen because of the money or because of any other reason, but the non-availability of competent manpower, because work is going to be obsolete fashion. Okay. So therefore, how do we engage people in the right portion of his brain to work and bring him to display the discretionary effort is going to be the matrix which will differentiate between the winner and not so, I will say loser rather. So the challenge with you all would be that how do you develop the skill sets? How do we help people to be and deliver what is expected by your client? So therefore, productivity to me, the classical definition of productivity is obsolete and no longer going to be relevant 3 year, 5 year down the road.
Interesting. Thank you, Alok. Rajiv Nethani, because your industry is at the forefront of, outsourcing of work, statement of work, all of that. It'd be great to hear your inputs, Rajiv.
So for us, actually, there are two phases of productivity we observed in terms of the changes. The first phase was as soon as we hit the lockdown situation, we saw there was a dramatic and significant improvement on the productivity. Our customers were very happy. And despite of the fear that how will we actually manage this distributed teams, we work in an agile mode where every sprint, there's an iterative discussion happening on the product's roadmap and how much have we actually worked on the release, and then customer will actually give us the feedback in terms of the journey. It's not a waterfall, it's an agile way of operating. And what happens every morning, there's a scrum meeting, 10 people of a scrum team, they will meet together, they will discuss about the schedule of the day, etc. And as per the estimation, they'll work. So we were scared that how would this happen? Because there's a collaboration which was getting challenged. But despite of that, the productivity went up significantly and customer acknowledged that. The code quality improved, the number of codes being written were significant, the storylines were significant as compared to the earlier context. And lately we realized that actually we were not able to maintain that momentum and it has started coming down. But still, it's better than what it used to be earlier. And my hypothesis to this is when we hit the lockdown, that time people were confined to their houses. They had no other reason to actually. They were all the time in front of their laptop. They had no other means to actually spend their time. How much TV or television would you watch, for example? So practically the number of hours went up in terms of people really spending time in front of their laptop, and there were no distractions in terms of tea break, coffee break, and walking on the corridor, talking with other colleagues, etc. And it all interactions were happening in front of laptop, and which are still happening though. So that really resulted into better time management and productivity. And over a period of time, people, when you blur the boundary between work life and personal life, there would be a lot of challenges because of that also. You'll feel burnout. You'll feel that you're always in front of laptop. You want to go into digital detoxification, and all that really led it to rationalize. So that kind of journey I've observed. Productivity is not a problem. You rightly said. Now, it's more on outcome based. Those managers and those leaders who used to have this conservative or traditional thinking that work from home is cannot work because people, they don't deliver. They can't deliver productivity. They have changed their mindset. So I think that's a good thing which has evolved as part of this journey. Back to you, Sanjay.
Thank you, Rajiv. And of course, coming to Rajiv Kapoor, because in a manufacturing setup, the whole equation is different, where you have to be at the shop floor. You can't do production from the house. So what are your comments on this point? I mean, what has the impact been in your sector, Rajiv?
So thank you. Like I said earlier, I think we were the most highly impacted because we were not used to this kind of scenario. So productivity, if I split that into two, of course, manufacturing people look at the output as productivity. So of course, that never got impacted. So once we are working back on the shop floor, everybody was as productive as earlier. Now let me come to the management. I think that is where the people started working from home, and like Rajiv just mentioned, our work improved. So the decision making became faster. One reason was that everybody was available all the time, and there was 100% attendance in meetings because it was all online and you had no place to go. So the work throughput really drastically improved, and decisions were taken much faster. Everybody was very agile and looking forward to this new way of working. I think that excitement was also there, that you couldn't connect with anybody at any point of time. So yes, I think that really helped us also, and there was a drastic improvement in this management productivity which we have seen. But I also completely agree with what Alok mentioned. I think the focus was not on productivity during these times. The focus, which surprisingly used to be productivity in manufacturing earlier, became employee well-being right now. The compassion came through, that shone through, the empathy shone through, and authenticity came up. I think these were some of the new things which started coming up in the management and let's say the employee relationships. These things we were witnessing. They were there earlier, but I think they got amplified. And this was the key focus. Productivity was important, yes, but these were the key focus areas, and these are here to stay. Like I said, this is now the new normal, not the new normal, now normal. It is there. We will be now looking at new types of leadership from the HR perspective. Different types of leadership models have come up now, and this is all because of the pandemic. And that was a blessing because I think it shook everybody up and brought out the real side where it should be, right on the table. So these are some of the learnings we got in manufacturing.
Sure. Thank you, Rajiv, for that perspective and that honesty. I think you're absolutely right. Well-being, health, both physical and mental, that has been really the focus of corporate India. And in a way, that has also resulted in productivity by accident, I guess, because, people really, managers and their subordinates, they started getting to know about their families, their pets, all of which you would not do that in a normal scenario. So you're so right. So, let me go back to, Rajiv Nethani. When it comes to, the skills, the skills needed, and manpower in general, you're bearing the brunt, of course, of, explosion in digital, need for talent. So what are organizations, like yourselves doing to manage this, number one? And number two, what is the role that staffing organizations and federations like us, what can we do, and how should we prepare ourselves? What kind of inputs from you so that we are able to help corporate India for the future and the changing demands, which we didn't know that existed prior to March 2020. Rajiv.
Thank you, Sanjay. So, the premise of that problem statement for our industry is that the skill has evolved. The skill requirements have evolved significantly. For example, earlier we used to talk about, okay, we had categorization of vanilla technology like Java, .NET, etc. And we used to say any new technology is a premium technology. Today, actually, there is nothing like primary skill. The complexity of the work has gone multifold. The kind of projects we are winning, the kind of work we are working for our customers have become more complex than ever before we would have imagined it to be. So what we are looking for? We're looking for people who are either full stack or they have multiple combination of skills, whether it is, for example, Java with microservices or Java with React, Java with something else, front-end technologies, back-end digital technologies, Azure, whether from a cloud perspective, whether it's Azure, AWS, GCP, DevOps engineers, container platform engineers, and so on and so forth. Basically, the list will be too long, upon which area to So the challenge is because of all this. In addition to this, let me also add the problem statement beyond this. In addition to this, as I said, that the technology industry is booming right now. That has actually caused a big gap between demand and supply. We were already struggling with the availability of the right skilled manpower or right skilled people in the market. On top of it, we are also dealing with this significant growth of business and across the industry context. Now that has widened the gap further. So you don't have right people available. And if at all people are available, then different companies are hunting the same set of people. And that, what is that causing to the companies now? That is causing counter offers. That is causing ethical dilemmas of accepting offer and then not joining. That is causing a lot of from the market in terms of retention issues. Now, when these kind of challenges are happening, what we are grappling with and where we need support. We need support in terms of industry being regulated under some protocols. For example, how can we ensure that when you have committed something, you go with that from an offer to joining perspective? How do we ensure that the supply side from the academia to industry is robust enough to supply the right competent freshers or campus graduates who could be deployed? Right now, we hire campus graduates, we put them into long duration interventions, and even then they are not, then they cannot be deployed in a billable assignments because they don't have that experience. They can't work on a live project immediately. There are certain bright spots, bright minds who are able to do it, but not everybody. The masses are still far from the reality. So what happens is customer is not willing to pay you for them. So we put them as a shadow resources, or we put them as a overrun, and over a period of time of 1 year, we will have only 50% of them getting built. So there's a cost investment which is also being there. So how can we create better pool of skilled manpower at the campus itself? That's another challenge, another solution we need to have. And third is, which is more internal to companies. I think where we know that we have understood the fact that we cannot have fully equipped or fully developed skilled people will be made available to us when we are hiring. So we need to actually build and train the skill capabilities inside the organization. So people who are still near required skill, or maybe 60% of the exact requirement, we can still hire them. We can put them into the training program, as we call that in our context as capability building, and then they can actually become future ready for us. These are some of the solutions which are more driven by industry, bodies, as well as the companies, which can help address this situation, at least in the current context. So these are some thoughts from me.
Sure. Thank you, Rajiv. I think that's really enlightening. I think going to Alok, you already sort of, hit the nail on the head when you mentioned about skilling and ISF, working along that lines. Just to, delve a little bit deeper on that. What else, can we do, as an industry together? Because it's clearly, absolutely right. I think, when you say that the challenge of tomorrow is not capital, is not, really political instability, it's talent. When it comes to corporate India, it's talent. And we need to figure that one out. And especially with this post-pandemic, things have changed further. And there are, of course, opportunities and challenges. What are your thoughts, Alok, on what are the key priorities, and opportunities for partners like us to help you in this need, Alok? Alok, sorry, you're on mute, Alok.
ISF, led by some of your very active members, have done fantastic job in terms of helping government to frame the labor laws and bring the right statutory framework. What my thought is that there's a very urgent need for ISF to commission series of studies, and have some center of excellences to skill people. And let me tell you, your need is going to be completely different than what probably Western countries and the Americans would have. And therefore, to really create a world-class talent, duly supported by your customer, should be the #1 priority. Number 2 is also you have to ensure that you, means all of us, of course, I am saying ISF as a body, but of course, all of us have the shared responsibility of that how do we bring the soft skills in our people, rather, whether it's a customer centricity, whether it's a proper ability to communicate, because as the processes are going to go more and more sophisticated, when I used to meet you in person, I still have some way to discount, what my hypothesis is about you, because I could see your rest of the body language, your words, eyes, etc. But in a webinar, that leeway is not available. And when you are dealing with even further complex methods of conversation, your every word is open to interpretation and misinterpretation. So as elementary skill as how many words per minute you speak, to how whether you are using the right word and the connotation of that word understood or meant by you and decoded by your audience, who is going to probably sign a one day even $1 billion check, not that scenario far away. If it is misunderstood, the whole deal is gone for toss. And this is somebody as a gig employee who is an expert in maybe setting up a chemical plant. You never know. So all these things, I mean, one side is such a big complexity and other side is a repetitive routine matter, your call center. One poor call with the call center and you know you are not going to invest or you are not going to be with this organization. So shelf life, recall are completely on a reducing size, or attention span is declining every day. In such a dynamic world, every minute should be used to reinforce the impressions. We are in the world where impressions are, we are fighting the war against the impressions and perceptions. So how do we get the right perceptions done? And temp staffing is weak area, because like it or not, they are facing customer maximum. Only escalation point will come to on roll. I am talking of BFSI. So person who is getting my housing loan signed is not on the rolls of a bank, right? Next thing is also add value to them so that they are out of that crutches of 15,000 and 20,000 salary. That is not human. How can you give 20,000 salary? I have read a story of a very large automotive company where the person was brought on the rolls of the company thanks to current talent crisis at the age of 42. And when he was interviewed, he said, "Sir, I have already given my 20 years of life to this company being on the minimum wages. The youth has gone." So we should also understand the social side of this problem. And therefore, skilling and making them evaluate to command better premium is something which ISF like body should do. So commissioning some research studies and skilling center, for which a lot of money is available, by the way, Sanjay. There is no dearth of money, let me tell you. And the way government is now going to speed of reforms and the acceleration of this, I think ISF can really play a very pivotal role across the sector, whether it's a BFSI, whether it's a technology, manufacturing, or science and research. You name the industry, and ISF can really need to accelerate their presence. So hire some good industry experts who will give you the right platform. Because wage arbitrage, as I said, is no longer going to be the lever to you, and it is not correct also philosophically. As a human resource professional, I don't agree with that. Last piece I will say is that ESG investing is becoming the new mantra. What would that mean? Organizations will have to be more transparent. Your grievance redressal procedure to your events and incidents have to go on your website, and human right is one of the highly high weightage in the whole process when it comes to human resource department. So compliance, dealing with people, equal remuneration, and human rights are some of the key matrices. There are many more matrices, but these are some of the matrices. So unfair practices, something which we should be in 21st century in that high-tech driven industry. Unfair practices has no space. We have to deal people with dignity, and dignity of labor is not just in the textbook. It is to be displayed every day. How do I treat them? And ISF can really educate even employers federation with their research, that what would it mean for the India of future. So this is my 2 bits on this.
Thank you very much, Alok. I think very, very valuable inputs for us as a federation and organization, and something definitely that we will incorporate, because it's in everybody's best interest. I want to go to Rajiv Kapoor, specifically on your sector. A couple of very relevant changes. One is this national scrapping policy, Rajiv, with the, recent ruling of the government. How would that change the employment scenario for your sector, number one? And number two, maybe related, is India ready with the skills for electric vehicles? How would that change, from an employment perspective? Over to you, Rajiv. Thank you.
Yeah. So the scrapping policy, I think, is a welcome decision, and this is what is required, not from the automotive sector, but as a country also. This is required to be done. From an employment perspective, I don't think it is going to have a major impact on driving employment. Yes, the production output will be a little bit higher, but then again, along with these things are going to be coming rationing of vehicles, because in metros, when the scrapping happens, you also have to be rationing the vehicles, like in places like Singapore and all, you have to ration. You have to ensure that you can have a parking place and all those things. So those regulations will also come in one day. So we are not looking at it from a very, let's say, thing which is going to bolster up employment. Yes, it is to be watched how it is panned out, and some states are still struggling to decipher it. They are coming up with their own suggestions and all. So this is something which we have to watch. On the EV side, I think we are not fully there. We actually never expected as an industry that it is going to catch up so soon. Because when the model was announced that, yes, we are now going to be ensuring the electric vehicles are on the roads in so many years, the industry actually went into a spin and said, sorry, we are not ready. We cannot be doing this so quickly. But lo and behold, the vehicles are on the road now. There are plenty of electric vehicles, two-wheelers, four-wheelers available on the road. So which means the industry has adapted very, very quickly to the EV model. And while we are, let's say, getting technology from maybe some other countries, but India, I think, is becoming largely self-reliant on the EV technology. And along with this, new employment opportunities are definitely getting generated, especially in the battery segment, the battery management segment. I think these are something new, which areas which have come up. Also, the experience when you are buying an electric vehicle, the experience which you get within the vehicle also is becoming very important. It's more a touchscreen based switches now. The physical switches are going away. Screens are everywhere. There are no dials. The dials are also on a virtual screen. So these are new things which are coming up in technology in the automotive sector. And the automotive sector is on a booster right now as far as technology is concerned. That is where the employment opportunity in automotive sector are largely tech right now. Most of the organizations are hiring technology people. And now connected to this, basically, that say we don't get ready employees. If you're hiring youngsters, you do not get ready employees. So for this, I think industry and academia have been talking for decades now. But I've seen a very pleasant change in the last 2 years, where the academia has now gotten very serious. And I am a part of one program where the faculty of an academic organization is undergoing an immersion program in an automotive organization. So they are actually on the shop floor. They're actually learning what is the technology usage on the shop floor. And that is what is going to get translated as education to the youngsters who are going to be passing out. That is, I think, a very welcome step. And like Alok mentioned, the investment on skill is being done at every level. Government is spending huge amount of money on skilling, and that's a very, very welcome sign. Even organizations, let's say in our context, we have a cluster. As a cluster, we have instituted our own center of excellences in the high-tech zones. So all the SMEs, people who are working in industry, so they are subject matter experts. So they are teaching engineers on the high-tech areas. So we have center of excellences, we have our own SMEs. And the third thing I told you was about the academia industry interaction and real immersion happening. So I'm seeing this shift happen, and automotive is leading this. And just to tell you, I was reading somewhere, the technology is becoming so powerful right now, and it's in your day-to-day life. We don't realize it. There was a study done about 10 to 12 years ago. We only had about 10 to 12 semiconductors or chips, as we call it, in our life. It is 130 now. So you multiply the global population by 130 and you get a staggering number of the chips which you require. That is what we are looking at. And that is where the shortage has started happening, because everybody is wanting more semiconductors, tech items are needing electronic items. That is where we are currently. So that's a shortfall. So the huge employment opportunities coming up in the tech zone, and automotive, thankfully, is leading that. And people are expecting more and more tech coming in the automotive vehicles. Every launch brings up 10 new features in a car. So I think that is what is leading the tech onslaught.
And thanks. Just to build on, so because I remember in one of our earlier discussions, you were mentioning between the few of us about more jobs being created in the semiconductor industry. So do you think that this is going to lead to a growth of talent in that sector? And also, if I'm not mistaken, you touched upon the healthcare sector.
Yeah.
So what are your comments on people listening, especially who are connected to these two related sectors?
So I'll start with the semiconductor thing. Of course, you would have read the news that Tata is starting their own electronic venture, because we cannot be dependent upon these semiconductors coming from other countries, because that is impacting our output. Major automotive players have reduced their output because the semiconductors are not available. So massive electronic engineering opportunity coming up. So people who are into this field, they have a reason to feel happy about. This is going to be premium right now. Healthcare, of course, we've seen what happened in the second wave. And that, I think the realization is very, very clear that healthcare wise, we are not where we should be, looking at the population we have. So I'm an ex-healthcare person also. So I've been in touch with my colleagues there. Massive drive on, again, skilling. And let me tell you, the second wave brought out a very important aspect, like Alok mentioned, on the customer centricity. Because of high level of pressure in the hospitals, the customer centricity went for a toss. And that resulted into major fiascos with the attendance of the patients and all those things. A lot of things happened. So that's a new learning which healthcare has now got. Of course, more and more skilled people are required. More and more people are getting enrolled as healthcare workers now, paramedics. So those are, again, huge opportunity areas. We had earlier also, but now I think the second wave has clearly given us a very big indication that this is a field which is going to be growing multifold. So it is definitely going to be one field to watch. Healthcare, India needs a lot of investment, and investment is going to happen, but of course we need a lot of skilled people onto joining the healthcare force.
Sure. Thank you, Rajiv. Let me go to your namesake, Rajiv Naithani. The topic, the elephant in the room, you briefly alluded to it on dropouts. It's on everybody's mind, of course, mostly in technology, but it's now happening in other sectors as well as things are picking up. But specifically in technology and technology related, we're seeing that. And I guess that's the downside when you have an explosion of digital and an emerging economy. So the question, Rajiv, is, I guess it's a reality right now. What are your thoughts? I mean, do you see this ebbing slowly and, stabilizing in the next 6 months, 12 months? Or is this going to be, I don't want to use the word new normal. What are your comments, on what's happening in this area? And is somebody doing something right? Some innovation, something that people can pick up, tips and tricks, which can help us all, Rajiv? Your comments on that.
I just hope it doesn't become the new normal. That would be too scary to operate in. But, actually what happens is every challenge brings the opportunity to actually build solutions around it. We saw that which happened during pandemic, when all of a sudden, all of us had to go remote and still supporting the business, right? So from that point of view, the industry has understood that the situation is going to be here for a longer time, because there's a lot of demand with respect to digital transformation for our customers across the industries, right? And you heard Rajiv Kapoor has been talking about a lot of technology focus, even in manufacturing space. Automobile was already adopting it. Healthcare has been going deeper into that already. So if you talk about any industry, manufacturing is also going deeper into RPA, for example, right? Or robotics, process automation perspective. Any industry you talk about is actually picking technology and adopting technology, either for their business operations or for their end customers, solutions and services perspective. This is going to be continuing, in my view, for next couple of years at least, where the surge in demand in IT space will continue to remain. Now, the only challenge which I foresee for geographies like India would be if we have increased people issues like we are facing today, then we'll have to look at other delivery offshore locations, either some part of Eastern Europe or Latin America, or maybe in Southeast Asia locations. That kind of market will also evolve. One. Two is companies now will have to actually, two things we have started doing, and that's what I was trying to tell as a solution in the previous question which you had asked. One is we're looking at how do we actually start looking at people who are not fully there from a skill transformation requirement perspective and put them into a train and build capability factory model so that we have the end output required which is needed. And second is that how do we actually look at the better relationship with the academia and work with academia in getting the right perspective from a talent availability perspective who are coming as a fresh graduates. And some companies have already started working on it. We are also doing it because we know the cost of running business, if we just go in a just-in-time hiring basis, and if we keep giving 2 offers in anticipation only 1 person will join, is too much. It's too costly for us. And it is also affecting. It has not yet affected, but it will eventually affect the business delivery capabilities for companies like us. So these are different ways through which possibly we'll see the solutions. But the first one is not good news for India because we'll lose the business out of India to different geographies.
Thank you, Rajiv. One question that's come from the audience, which I just read, is a very interesting one. Why are a lot of organizations insisting on hiring HR people only from a particular sector? For example, this person is from the apparel sector, and the person feels that, hey, my skills are fungible. I mean, HR is pervasive across industries. Wanted to hear your thoughts. Why is that happening, or is that a trend, or is that an exception? Be great. Any one of you can take a jab at that.
So I'll take it on. Yes, there is a trend that you want to hire the HR person from the same type of industry because you hit the ground running and you understand the nuances and you understand the needs of that organization. But thankfully, the trend is changing. I'm an example. So I have been in manufacturing, I've been in healthcare, I've been in services, I'm back in manufacturing. So I've seen the entire spectrum. So it actually widens your bandwidth of people understanding, and that's a great thing to have. And I'm happy to share that we are not actually now looking at hiring HR people from the same type of industry because we want new thought processes to come in, because manufacturing wants to learn what is happening in the IT sector, what is happening in the service sector, because those are the kind of policies and processes we would like to have. Because employees are not now looking at, I'm in automotive, so I must be content with these kind of policies. They compare themselves to every type of industry. So we want to give them a holistic experience, and that is the reason we are not only looking at the same type of industry HR person coming in. So thankfully, the things are changing.
So Sanjay, I'll just take a minute on this. It's a mixed bag, as Rajiv is saying. If you need a front-ending transactional person, one would prefer the same industry because you really don't have a learning lead time. You just go on and just start dealing with employees. But if you otherwise look at the CFO and CXO or CEO level, people are open to, for example, recently a new mutual fund has been launched. The CEO comes from a completely different sector, has no background to MF industry. Similarly, you will see in FMCG companies, CEO would come, or for example, Bharti Airtel CEO comes from FMCG sector, right? So I think it is a call position to position and what is the need of the hour the business is taking. So it's a mixed bag. I mean, you cannot be generalized at this point in time.
Got it. Rajiv, question to you, Rajiv Nathani, is notice period a part of the problem? One of the questions that has come. Is that really part of the problem?
Actually, notice period is not the primary problem. The primary problem is the demand and supply gap. And what is happening is that is actually causing or resulting into multiple further problems. So what is happening is, now suppose, and that's where initially I was talking about the ethical dilemma of the cultural context of Indians, right? We accept offer then we resign, and then if the notice period is 2 months and 3 months, in between we are still hunting different jobs and then accepting different offers and joining different company. So actually notice period is driving that behavior, which is ethical behavior in my view, and resulting into this kind of situation of dropouts, right? If you have committed, why would you not honor that commitment, right? There's no regulation that's where nobody talks about it. But the challenge is that notice period, if we reduce, possibly can address that behavior to great extent, because your lead time to negotiate and join somewhere else possibly will go down, but it will not completely be eliminated. That's my perspective.
So one question, Rajiv, from Paul, who's now in Japan, ex-MD of Randstad. Very interesting question from a global perspective. Everybody is cheering for India. India is one of the biggest labor markets in the future. What are some of the triggers, and anybody can go, because you're all stakeholders here. What are some of the key triggers, that will, enhance this, that will help the industry accelerate, the entire staffing industry? What are some of those key critical triggers that will help the staffing industry accelerate and make sure that we hit these milestones that we're talking about in the next 3 to 5 years?
Okay, I will just take it on. I think the triggers have they're already visible. One is, of course, the technology trigger. I think most of the organizations, if you look at it from a technology perspective, have come to a reasonably good platform thanks to the pandemic. So I would say that every company is now an IT company. So we may be manufacturing, we may be healthcare, but it's run by IT throughout. So they're almost at the same platform. So that is one step. Second great thing which has happened or is about to happen is the new employment laws which are going to be coming up. So I think the industry has been crying hoarse for the past 3-4 decades to look at the employment laws. And now they are now ready to be launched. We are just a few months away from that. These are going to give massive recognition to new ways of working, the new types of employment. And that is where ISF kind of organizations can really benefit. And now there's an official recognition to a gig worker. They are covered under the social laws. There are the fixed term employees who have been recognized. It's a type of employment. Earlier, we used to be hiding things under the carpet. Now they're absolutely okay to have. So I think these are the opportunities. These were the triggers which we were wanting. And now the government is going to be announcing them. So we must take full advantage of these new things which are coming up under the new labor codes and go full blast and train people, skill people. Even the laws are becoming very flexible. I was reading somewhere that a dual employment also, not exactly dual employment, but let's say a gig worker is spending some time in one organization is allowed to another 4 hours in some other organization. So that is, the service rules are going to be permitting that. Earlier, this was not possible. So I think the skill is being respected. The individual skill is now coming to the forefront, and the laws are also now accepting and respecting that. These are the triggers, and these are almost here. So we must take full advantage of these.
Great. Thank you, Rajiv. So we're going to go to Alok quickly in the interest of time. We're getting a lot of questions. Alok, one interesting question addressed to you is, a lot of demand for, quick talent and, to have people on bench. So for a staffing agency, especially a small startup, staffing agency or evolving agency, is that possible? Is that really possible with the margins nowadays? What are your thoughts and your advice?
Okay, I think the question on the creating bench, if your employer is willing to pay for it, because finally bench is no longer a good word, frankly speaking, in IT world. Okay, nobody wants to have bench. I'm sure Rajiv will stand by me. And we had almost somehow industry got the control over it, but I think given the scenario, and as I said earlier also, that attrition and disengagement is likely to be the new pandemic. In such scenario, similarly to what is happening to semiconductors, where Tatas are now going to have their own setup, obviously bench is a one natural response, but long-term response is not the bench. Response is to create the talent pool which will be available. And therefore there's a supplementary question where somebody asked, Mr. Rao has asked that how can we stop people from taking the offer once accepted the offer? Like it or not, offer accepting is yet not, done as a contract formally. So because you haven't given something, unless you have given in kind something, a formal contract is not been done unless person joins, and you can't contract out law. So therefore, employment being a fundamental right, everybody has right to increase his price in a competitive market, because no organization will guarantee if there is a job cuts or a bad scenario, they will protect the wages. So giving the countermeasure, you can't stop anybody from taking a bigger offer unless he's accepted, signed the dotted line and joined you. The joining date will be there. So every contract has an exit clause. So I don't think that is going to be possible. Coming back to this, bench is something which is a very commercial question between the service provider and the service receiver.
Okay. And the other, one question, a very quick one, maybe a rapid fire. Skills of tomorrow, generalist or specialist? Let's start with Rajiv Nethani. Generalist or specialist?
I think, specialist has better chances of survival in our kind of industry.
Okay.
While generalist is important, but I'll still rate specialist higher.
Okay. Alok?
Yeah, I think, look, there's another question also on that. The middle management most of the middle managers today are stuck, and a lot of people are consulting me for their coachings and mentoring. And I have one thing to say, all the middle managers, please reinvent, redefine yourself very, very fast. You are the most vulnerable lot for this transformation, because you have reached a salary which is now out of the market. Younger talent is available to do the same job, triple the speed and 1/4 of the cost. So you reinvent, redefine, otherwise you'll be obsolete very soon. Middle management is seriously at serious risk. So a lot of people who are 30, 35, 40 lakhs etc. are not able to make the transition to CXO position, and they can't accept the job lower rate because they haven't invested. One message to members of Federation and the people who are attending this forum, please invest 3 to 5% of your annual CTC in reskilling yourself. Otherwise, you will be irrelevant sooner than you know or you anticipate.
Thank you, Alok. Let me go to Rajiv Kapoor, generalist or specialist. Last point.
So again, it's a tricky question. Both are important, I would say. Generalists are also very important, but of course, the future is more specialist.
Great. Back to you, Sucheta.
Thank you so much. I think it is such an exciting panel and such an exciting subject, and we are not able to do justice in the time. But in the essence of time, I have to thank all of you who have taken out time to join us. Thank you, Mr. Kapoor. Thank you, Mr. Shivpurkar. Thank you, Rajiv Nethani. And most of all, thank you so much, Sanjay, for putting in the effort and to help us complete this session in such a manner that at least we could take up most of the points that even the the people who have joined us have asked us to be able to address that. Further questions, I'll definitely come back to you if a requirement is there. Otherwise, thank you so much for this great evening. Wishing you a very, very happy weekend and have a great time in the respective locations that all of you are currently.
Good. It was a pleasant surprise to get a question from Paul.
Yes, absolutely. He's cheering for India from Japan.
Yes.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, Sujita. Thanks, Rajiv.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Taking permission to sign off. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.